Do this every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, and this week I am proud to present to you, usually do Q&As on Fridays and Saturdays, and Sundays is our live stream lecture, and I am proud to present to you ancient Greece. We'll be discussing the history of one of the most well-known civilizations in all of human history, its foundings, its highlights, its development, its changes over time, and of course its contributions to art, architecture, literature, religion, philosophy, all of that stuff, as well as the development of its army, its military prowess, the rise of the Alexandrian Empire, how Hellenism changed the entire world, and of course the decline and absorption of Greek culture by the Romans. So we will be discussing that today at length as we talk about all sorts of history all across the world, ancient and modern, medieval, all types, and we're going to be talking about some ancient and classical history, the rise of the ancient Greeks. So I hope you enjoy that, and if you like history and social studies, you're in the right place. Consider liking and subscribing, becoming a friendly neighborhood historian. I won't be interacting with the chat as much as I normally do until the end. We might have a little bit of time for Q&A at the very end, but we are going to be focusing instead on the ancient Greece and all of the incredible things of ancient Greece. So if you're joining us, welcome. A happy Sunday to you. Hopefully you're enjoying yourselves. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel where we do history in a friendly, neighborly manner. So yeah, if you're enjoying what you're hearing throughout, like and subscribe. To all of those who are back and have been with us for a while, it's good to see my friendly neighborhood historians. My moderators like Harry and Hearts will probably be holding down the chat, putting in the social media handles where you can follow us there. And of course, it's always good to see friendly neighborhood historians who have been with us for a long time, like Gaiahan, who's already here, and Harry, hello. So yeah. I will be interacting with the chat pretty infrequently, more focused on telling you the stories of the ancient Greeks and how incredible they are. And my background art for today is the death of Alexander, Alexander the Great's death, being depicted here with his generals who would form the Didache, watching him die at such a young age, only 33 years old. So, anyways, ancient Greek civilization and culture develops, and really is that it really develops at the end of the first millennium, at the beginning of the first millennium BC, or the last millennium BC. Of course, in BC, it's reversed from where it is AD. So around the 11th, 10th, and 9th centuries BC, you have a development of Greek culture in certain areas. The Greeks are going to be predominantly known as a city-state civilization, what I call a disunited civilization, where you have certain civilizational aspects being important to different peoples and different groups, but they are not one politically united country. So unlike the ancient Egyptians, who have a pharaoh ruling over all of the land that shares that culture, the ancient Greeks have a divided culture where you have the same culture, a divided civilization where you have the same culture, but you have different aspects of that culture practiced in different areas. And although they share certain religious, linguistic, and cultural affinities, they may be at war with each other. There may be divisions between them. The city-state culture probably is at its apex in ancient Greece. It wasn't created by the ancient Greeks. The ancient Mesopotamians and the earliest Egyptians and Chinese were practicing city-state functionalities thousands of years before the Greeks really developed. But around 1100, 1200 BC, the Greek identity starts to come about, and this is a result of a couple of different things. So we're going to look at the background of exactly where the Greeks came from and how they started to develop their civilization. Most scholars believe that the ancient Greeks migrated from the Asian steppe and the Middle East and areas around there, as well as Eastern Europe, and kind of where it gets, the Dardanelles, where it gets close between Anatolia and Turkey and Greece in the west, and started to settle in different areas. Obviously, the Bronze Age collapse changes ancient empires in so many ways. You have the rise of the Iron Age in about the 15th and the 16th, 15th centuries BC. And that leads to mass migrations of different Indo-Aryan peoples, such as the Hittites, who create an empire in Mesopotamia and the northern Levant and in Anatolia. And so they are one of the first major Turkish kingdoms, one of many to come in the future. So you have the migration of different types of people into different areas. One of these groups of people who probably come from the Aegean, the eastern part of the Mediterranean, are the Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples will become notorious for their participation. One of their groups, the Philistines, who are considered to be a Sea People, who probably were Sea People, who settled in the Levant and became one of the main rivals of the Kingdom of Israel. Another group of Sea Peoples also attacked and invaded Egypt around the 12th century BC. But settlement by the and development of culture and civilization by the various different sea peoples in along the different islands in the Aegean Sea, which is the eastern part of the Mediterranean, helped contribute to the rise and creation of Greek culture. The most ancient of these Greek, and again, when you're telling the story of Greek culture, you're dealing with a civilization that is in parts and places and has different cities and different areas being predominant at certain times. And so we're going to be talking about different phases of Greek civilization based on certain areas in the Greek world, not just Greece itself, but all of the islands between Greece and Anatolia and in the south. The Minoan civilization is one of the biggest examples and first examples and best examples of the development of Greek culture. Developing pottery out of clay and things like that. The Minoans settled in the island of Crete, and they were the predominant culture on the island of Crete. So they aren't a mainland Grecian culture and civilization, yet they have some of the earliest. Our archaeology seems to indicate that they have some of the earliest development of Greek art and Greek art and architecture. Greek culture seems to start there. The Minoans have some of the earliest Greek writers and Greek scientists, and so Crete will become a predominant part of the Grecian islands and become considered part of Greek culture because of the Minoans, who would greatly influence later Greek civilizations and societies. So hopefully you're all hearing me well. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. This is our live stream lecture on the ancient Greeks and the development of one of the most important and ancient civilizations in all of history. So, what happens next? You have the development of the Minoans. This is around the 12th, 11th BC, and there's probably some intermixing with the sea peoples who settled the Grecian islands and have some development on their culture. Obviously, this is during the Iron Age, so after the different Stone Ages, which were the earliest parts of human history, you have the development of copper and later bronze. There are different parts to the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age collapse leads to several civilizations in the Middle East collapsing, and in the Near East, as it's called, and you have a rise of new civilizations using iron and chariots and things like that. And the Sea Peoples are one of these civilizations that emerge at the time of the Iron Age, and they, of course, will be heavily influential in the Middle East, as I already mentioned, but they're also going to be influential in the development of Greek culture because a lot of them are probably going to settle in that area. So the Sea Peoples, different types of them, are influential in the development of the Greeks. You have Minoan civilization from Crete being influential in the development of Greek culture. So again, some of the earliest art that we can see and kind of say that's Greek, that has a Greek influence, is from Crete and from the Minoans. Some of the early Grecian scientists, Miletus, I believe Miletus was from Crete. You have different Greek scholars early from Crete. But the Minoans are not the first mainland Grecian city-state or culture to develop. Again, you've got different cultures developing because you have a disunited civilization and you have city-states being a huge part of Greek life and all of that. What happens next? The Mycenaeans develop. They are the first mainline Greek civilization, and Mycenae is one of the most important Greek city-states. It's one of the earliest Greek city-states. Thebes and Mycenae are a couple of the earlier ones, and the Mycenaean civilization develops around the 10th and 9th centuries BC. So a little bit after the Minoan Cretes, you see the rise of the Mycenaean civilization, which is on the eastern part of, and again, Greece is divided into several different sectors and segments. You've got, of course, the islands, which we talked about already with the Minoans and the Cretan civilization. You also have the upper area of Greece, which is connected to the Balkans, and you have the lower isthmus, if you will, which includes some of the biggest cities in Greece, like Corinth and Sparta. Mycenae, if I'm correct, was part of that lower isthmus of areas, and the upper part of Greece is where you'll get cities like Athens and Thessalonica, and other very, very important Greek cities. If I'm correct, Thebes is also in that upper area. But you have some of the earliest poetry. The Greeks are renowned for their poets. They have some of the most important poets developing around this time and coming from the Mycenaean civilization. And you have a knowledge of these different towns and city-states already clearly evident. And although the Mycenaeans are one of the most advanced and prodigious civilizations of the cities of the area, they are not the first. They are not the first ones, and they are not the only ones. Really, the first major example of Greek art or literature that really gives us an understanding of how Greek culture worked, especially at this time, comes from the writings of Homer. And Homer is, of course, known as the blind poet, and a lot of what he wrote is up to historical speculation and obviously includes a lot of religious exaggerations. The Greeks themselves will become the first historians, and you could argue that Homer might be the first historian. For years, people doubted that Homer's writings were actually valid at all or there was any truth to them. And although we can't obviously confirm the vast majority of what he wrote, the story of the destruction of Troy in the Iliad is obviously one of the most important stories, not just in Grecian culture, but in all of world culture. Troy was destroyed in the early 11th century BC, if I'm correct. I think 1080 was the year it was destroyed. It might have been that or the 12th century. Until the 19th century AD, there wasn't a hardcore evidence of an existence of the city of Troy. However, recent archaeology has corroborated a lot of what Homer wrote and understood, as modern archaeology in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries has contributed to a great understanding of ancient civilizations from the Middle East and the Greeks as well. So Troy was a city, it was in Anatolia, and the Greeks supposedly destroyed it, whereas now there's not a huge amount known. There was obviously some sort of shared culture between the Trojans and the Greeks. However, the Greeks themselves consider them to be enemies, and you probably have a much better case to be made that these were pirates and marauders working together in certain ways in order to carry away spoils and destroy an ancient city. Now, that isn't as exciting as the story that Homer tells. Homer basically tells the story of a young prince from Troy named Paris being inspired by a dream in which he picks the goddess Aphrodite to give him the most beautiful woman in the world. The most beautiful woman is Helen, who is the wife of Menelaus, who is the king of Sparta. And this is the earliest days of these cities. So the early days of these city-states, most of them were monarchies of some sort or another. You don't really have the development of democracy like you see later on. We haven't even talked about Athens yet. However, so Paris, along with his brother Hector, go to Sparta, and they kidnap Helen of Troy and take her with them, and Helen marries Paris, and they return to Troy with their father Priam. Eventually, Menelaus, of course, finds out that his wife has absconded with his Trojan, and he goes to his brother, Agamemnon, who is the king of Mycenae. And during Homer's time and at the time of his writing, Mycenae is the dominant Greek city-state. So Agamemnon is able to sound the call and unite the different Greek cities and areas. Although they are not one civilization, they are willing to help each other, and they go over and fight for 10 years against the Trojans. And they bring great warriors like Achilles, who supposedly was invincible, and they bring other of course, the king of Ithaca, which is another important Greek city-state. I believe if I'm correct, it's an island, and that is, of course, Odysseus. And they fight for 10 years. They aren't able to penetrate the giant walls of the city of Troy. And basically, at the very end, they decide to create a ruse. They create a horse. They leave it as a gift. They take their ships away, and a bunch of their soldiers are hiding in this horse. The Trojans bring it in, and after a giant orgy, are too drunk and in too much of a stupor to actually fight back against the Greek soldiers who have snuck into their city through the horse, open the gates. The Greek forces return to the sea, and they destroy this. They sack the city of Troy, and according to legend, some of the Trojans are able to escape. So this is all part of Homer's writings. This is not necessarily historically true. There is very, very little to suggest that it is actually true, although more and more evidence seems to corroborate some of the ideas that Homer had when he wrote this incredible poem. And this poem contributes greatly to is interesting because it's not necessarily historically accurate, but it is historical in the sense that it contains enough truth and information to help develop a Greek identity and help develop Greek society and Greek civilization in a way that it hadn't been developed before. Culture, poetry, art, for a divided civilization is necessary for understanding its cultural markers. So Greek people are unified in the sense they share this common culture, and that culture is greatly developed through the religious message, through the historic and political message of Homer's Iliad, which obviously has this idea that if the Greeks work together, they will be extremely successful. And this is a theme that will continue to run for centuries to come, that despite their divisions, the Greeks are better off when they are united, working together, than when they are divided. And this will come up when they come up against their major arch rival in the coming years from the east, the Persians. But basically, so there's this underlying idea, an argument that Homer's starts and is continued later, where the Greeks are better off with each other. But it's obviously extremely important to Greeks, no matter where they are from, this story of the legends of Helen of Troy and the Iliad. Homer's Copernendum, or second volume, is extremely important, and that's, of course, the 10 years it takes Odysseus to return to Ithaca, and includes many stories of legendary monsters and interactions with the gods, and it shows the development of Greek religion that the Greeks were already starting to practice even long before Homer existed. So Homer is a really, really good litmus test for understanding where Greek culture was, where Greek religion and Greek poetry was in the 9th century BC when he was supposedly alive. And so the Greeks have this successful campaign against the Trojans. They destroy their city, and then Odysseus is basically running around trying to get back to Ithaca, and he's able to return and eventually take back his throne at the end of the Odyssey, so it's a happy ending for him. We'll see how Ridley Scott does with that story. I think that movie comes out next year. But basically, Homer gives us a ground of understanding about what ancient Greek civilization, culture, and religion looked like in the first half of the first millennium BC, where you don't have a huge amount of ideas before then. You have a development of Homer's writings as a guide to what the ancient Greeks believed about each other and about themselves and about the gods, how their culture was developing, what they shared in common, and what was different about their various different city-states and mini-civilizations within this larger Greek civilization. But what happens next? So this isn't to say that Homer invented this stuff. This stuff was clearly already popular and common for the Greeks long before Homer existed. Homer is just when something is written down, especially in ancient history, you can assume that it had been practiced and believed in some way, shape, or form for centuries before. Homer was writing centuries after the events of the Trojan War that destroyed the city of Troy historically, so embellishments and exaggerations are clearly common. However, the ideas surrounding what Homer wrote about probably already were common, especially religiously. And the Greeks are an extremely religious people. The Greeks are also extremely good at building. They're extremely interested in architectural designs, and they're going to build some of the most important structures in all of ancient history, in all of world history. Several of the wonders of the world are Grecian, although they have been lost and nobody knows, and although they have been lost or destroyed. You have the Colossus of Rhodes, which is built on Rhodes, which is an island near Turkey, but is considered to be one of the Grecian islands. You also have the Temple of Zeus at Halicarnassus, one of the most important temples of the ancient world. This was a giant, I think it was bronze or brass statue of Zeus inside these giant columns. The Greeks also developed the column, basically. The column that becomes so common not just in Roman architecture later on, but is used in the neoclassical period in the development of American and British buildings, and is inspirational for architecture all over the world, where you have the three major types, the Ionic, Doric, and Corinthine columns, all come from the Greeks. So their architecture is extremely impressive. They build some of the most impressive wonders of the ancient world that are obviously some of them are lost to time, but what's left is still an extremely impressive feat. Of course, those columns are going to be used on the giant on the peak of the city of Athens, the Acropolis, which is the city overlooking the city, and on the Acropolis, obviously the main building is going to be the Parthenon, which is a temple to the goddess Athena, who is the patron goddess of Athens. And I can't go any further without talking about the importance of Greek religion. The Egyptians have a pretty well-developed polytheistic understanding of the world with a lot of mythology around it, but the Greek one becomes even more fleshed out and is probably the premier example of mythology. Norse mythology is obviously extremely important. You have different paganic mythologies being important in the development of different religions and celebrations throughout the world that continue to this day, such as Samhain, which is coming up, which we call Halloween. The Chinese have a well-developed mythology of various different gods. You have the mandate of heaven, the idea of Chinese political culture developing completely from that. But I think when it comes to ranking and understanding mythology, the Greeks have the premier mythology. When you think of mythology, you're more or less likely thinking speaking of a Greek deity or a Greek, you have a Greek frame of reference for understanding how mythology works. And of course, the Romans are going to love Greek mythology so much that they're basically going to copycat it in their own way, identifying all the gods they were worshiping as the Greek gods with Roman names, and then those names will become the names of the planets. But basically, the Greeks have a extremely interesting mythology, and when you have a polytheistic religion, as almost all religions in the ancient world were at that time, the major exception, of course, being Judaism. What Akhenaten tried to do in Egypt is also of worthy note, and Zoroastrianism is coming up too. So you've got some monotheism, but the vast majority of the world is polytheistic. You have different gods serving different purposes, and oftentimes are in clash with each other. Much like the Greek civilization themselves, you have gods working on their own, sometimes working together, and sometimes opposing each other. So you have patron gods of different cities. For instance, the Spartans, considered one of the more militant cities of ancient Greece, believed that Hades was their, or not Hades, Ares, the god of war, was their patron god. The Athenians, who seem to be the poetic, literary, balanced, interested in philosophy city, of course, choose the goddess of wisdom, Athena, as their patron goddess. And that's why the city is named Athens. But anyways, let me explain a little bit about the different a little bit about Greek mythology. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with it already. But basically, in the first major group of gods that control the universe are known as the Titans. They are not the creators of the universe, but kind of inherit it from the first creators of the universe, and they are definitely primordial. They're definitely more prehistoric, and they are not the ones in charge when the Greek civilization itself is developing, because of the Olympians who overthrow them. So basically, what happens there? One of the Greek gods, a god named Kronos, who is a Titan, is the god of time. And that's where we get chronological from, by the way. And Kronos has a habit of fearing that he will be overthrown by any of his children, so he decides to devour all of them. He devours names you might recognize, like Hades, Poseidon, and Hera. But one of his youngest one is saved by the mother. I'm trying to remember her name. I think her name is and the Roman version of it is where we get Saturn from. I'm not sure. But his wife saves the youngest one of these gods. And this god is, of course, Zeus. Zeus is hidden in a cave for a long time, and eventually he grows up to oppose Kronos. Kronos had I believe it was either a dream or something, that one of his children would overthrow him, and that's why he had devoured them all. His wife gave him a rock sandwich and said, "This is Zeus," and he had eaten him, believing he had devoured yet another one of the gods. He had eaten a rock, which is weird because you'd think he'd be able to know the difference, but whatever. So Zeus hides in a cave, grows up, and eventually challenges Kronos and the Titans, and is able to cut open Kronos' belly and free the Olympians and free the rest of the gods. Those gods then turn on the Titans, and there's a giant civil war between the gods, and the Olympians eventually prevail. Kronos is killed. Some of the other Titans who try to influence spoil what the Olympians are trying to do, such as Prometheus, Epimetheus, and Atlas, are punished in horrifying ways. Prometheus has his liver eaten every day. Atlas is forced to carry the world on his shoulders. That's where we get the Atlas, the map. All of that comes from the ancient Greeks. If you're seeing things that you've heard about and seen in different ways, shapes, or forms, it's because the Greek civilization and culture and mythology is that influential in our world, even 3,000 years after these stories really started to be circulated. So Zeus takes over the Olympians and rules as the head of the gods from Mount Olympus. Olympus was the tallest mountain in Greece, and so the Greeks believed that at the top of this mountain that there dwelt the gods. So that's why they are called the Olympians. So Zeus is the head god. You have Poseidon, who becomes the god of the sea. So if you want, you better hope that you have a good relationship with Poseidon, or he will try to destroy you. You also have Hades, who is the god of the dead and the underworld. For instance, he seizes a woman named Persephone. And so basically a lot of the Greek mythology is what is called an ideology. It explains the way the world is without necessarily being accurate, and is more of a moral lesson. The Greek gods are not like any sort of monotheistic god or the Hindu gods necessarily. They have failings and weaknesses. They are corrupt, evil, and self-serving. They are more like superheroes than they are like a perfect deity. So Zeus is not a comparable one to Allah or to Jesus, I suppose. But you could say that Zeus is just as powerful in one way or another, although he is limited by the fact that despite being the head of the god of the world, he is also dealing with gods who have influence in other affairs. Even his own children, like Apollo, who's the god of the sun, or Ares, the god of war. And you probably know Ares or Kratos because of god of war. But anyways, literally. Again, video games heavily influenced by ancient Greece. Almost everything's been influenced by the ancient Greeks because their language becomes the common lingua franca of the Roman world. The Romans love the Greeks so much that they adopt many of their architectural, religious, and cultural customs, including their language being common in the Roman Empire, more so than Latin in some quarters, leading to the fact that the influence of the Greek language helps develop the Western world's vocabulary and dictionary and all of that. So, no, I don't believe Zeus had 3 daughters. But yes, Zeus actually, interestingly enough, if you were talking about Zeus's daughters, copies his father Cronos. He's worried about a daughter who is too wise and who will overthrow him, so he tries to devour her, and yet she basically gives him a giant headache, and she jumps out of his head in a similar way to Kronos, and this is the story of Athena. And Athena becomes the goddess, the patroness of the Athenians of the city of Athens. So, but my whole point is, if you look at this is all an ideology of explaining how the world is the way it is. For instance, for the ancient Greeks, Hades, the god of the underworld, fell in love with one of the beautiful women of the world named Persephone. And he kidnaps her, and Zeus is outraged at this, but Zeus has his own dalliances and loves to go around sleeping with human women all the time, creating some of the most important demigods in Greek history, like Perseus and of course, Heracles, or who the Romans will call Hercules because of this. However, Zeus decides to strike a compromise. So he allows Persephone to stay half of her time, bringing light and joy and peace to the world, and good and the sun and the sunshine to the crops in the overworld, and then half the time she returns to the underworld through the river Styx to be with her husband Hades. So fall and winter are when she is in the underworld. Summer and spring are when she is in the overworld, allowing humanity to enjoy sunshine and warmth. Believe it or not, that is how the ancient Greeks understood their weather. They didn't have an understanding of climatological factors. Now, of course, you have many famous ancient scientists. I already mentioned Miletus. You have scientists, philosophers, and writers throughout Greek history who are very skeptical of all of these stories and see them for more of what they were supposed to be originally, which are moral fables helping people to understand the way the world is, which are supposed to guide us along the path to live as good of a life as we possibly can. That is how, at the very least, the Greek philosophers came to understand these fables and legends. So you may wonder, if this society is so superstitious and so full of strange explanations, how can they have some of the greatest thinkers and philosophers of all time? Well, some of these philosophers and a lot of these thinkers understood that these stories were meant to elicit a moral response and moral behavior, and were not supposed to be taken as literal interpretations of how the world was. And you have some of the greatest Greek mathematicians, Pythagoras, Euclid, who helps to discover the major sectors of geometry, and Archimedes, and I'm sure that all of them were very skeptical about this and were far more interested in learning how the world actually worked based on their own study, which is why Archimedes calculated the diameter of the world almost within complete accuracy. For a man living 500 years before Jesus, he did a pretty darn good job and didn't rely on the story of Atlas holding the world over his shoulders like the Olympians had supposedly punished him. So you can't get anywhere. So we talked about Greek mythology, we're talking about Greek art and literature. The patrons of the different gods are patrons of various Greek cities, and many people there are dozens of Greek city-states, and I can do several live stream lectures talking about them. We've already talked about the Minoan civilization of Crete, which is kind of the prologue to the Greeks. Then you talk about the first major city-state, Mycenaean. It's no accident that Homer had the leader of Mycenaean be the leader of the Greeks in his story, because Mycenaean was the dominant city-state of his time. If he had written 5 centuries later, it probably would have been the Athenians or the Spartans. But the Spartans, of course, are mentioned, as are the Ithacans and some others. You have Corinth, which is one of the major cities. There are various major cities that develop in Greek society that are extremely important, but the two major heavy hitters that we all know about are Athens and Sparta. I have an entire video on Athens and Sparta and discuss their importance in Greek history and the development of world history. Please go check that out. I have long-form videos dropping every Monday and Friday here on the channel, and short videos dropping every day, and I talk about the ancient Greeks a lot in all of them. You should also check out my video on Alexander the Great, because I've got a lot on Alexander. But we'll get to him in a minute. Athens and Sparta develop kind of at the same time. Sparta is a little bit earlier than Athens, but they kind of are seen as opposites. They shouldn't be, but they are the major heavy hitter city-states when you consider Greek civilization and culture. Sparta is considered the militant, aggressive city. They are an oligarchy where you have kings who are elected. You have a small group of council members who make decisions. You don't have as much open democracy as you will see in Athens, but it isn't quite the tyranny that a lot of people would suppose by just seeing 300. For instance, when Leonidas, the man from the story of the Thermopylae battle, is killed, he is one of 2 kings in Sparta at the time. Sparta develops a very strict militaristic style of fighting. They are some of the most disciplined fighters. They train in sports all the time. By the way, gymnasiums, athletics, the development of organized sports really starts with the Greeks in many ways. They're the first ones to do the Olympics, obviously, which they believe were created by Hercules to train in order to complete his 12 trials so he could become a god. So once again, you have an ideology explaining why the Greeks run around and compete in the Olympics, why you have swimming, decathlons, all of these, the triathlons, decathlons, pentathlons, those are all based on Greek numbers and are indeed triangle, pentagon, all based on original Greek words for 3, 5, 10, so on and so forth. But basically, Sparta is more militant. Their women are trained to fight. Their women are trained to engage in sports. Wrestling is very common amongst the men. The Spartans show no regard for human life in many ways. You earn your keep by being as strong and aggressive as you possibly can, and that starts from the earliest days of your life. Young babies that are considered to be defective or weak are usually left out and exposed to the elements, and are basically given to the wolves because they are not. So a kind of a rudimentary form of eugenics is practiced where you don't have any scientific knowledge about the child, but you make observable claims about the child's weaknesses and then you dispose of them. And this was common practice. In fact, throughout the Roman Empire, Christianity would later abolish it. But the Romans picked that up from the Greeks. I don't know about Eastern civilizations doing that as much at that time. The Persians might have. The Assyrians did, kind of. The Assyrians are probably your best bet. But what happens next, as I say all the time? The Spartans have a very strong sense of being the best possible warriors they can. And I can't go any further without talking about the Greek military. And although the military is somewhat similar throughout the various different city-states, perhaps the best example of the Greek army is the Spartans, and they will prove that time and time again. Greek soldiers were usually required to use spears. Spears were extraordinarily common. Long spears on long shafts with a butt that would be used for puncturing and pushing, and a head that would have a sharp edge to it. These long spears and the formation in which the Greek, I'm trying to remember the name of the spear, but the formations in which the Greek men would march, the soldiers, was called the phalanx, and they had a spear and they had a shield next to the spear, and they would march, and they would be slow, but they would be effective, and you would basically be mowed down by these soldiers. Their shields and their brass and bronze armor and iron was able to deflect missile fire, rocks from slingers, and things like that, even javelins. This was an extremely effective form of armor, of defense, and of course you've got really large shields to protect you. The only downside was that it would make you rather slow. At the same time, the Greeks also had these very long spears, and if their formation broke down, they had an iron sword. They could pull out a short one, and they could use that and fight their opponents hand to hand. So the Greek soldiers were extremely good at hand to hand combat. They were good at fighting with their hands, with swords, and especially with spears. But the phalanx was the death troop. It was the Navy SEAL team. Navy SEALs of its time. It was the most advanced shock troop of the ancient world at that time, and the Romans would take a while to learn how to best them, but basically by giving their own soldiers javelins and moving a lot faster, they're eventually able to wear down and break the Greek forces. But the Greek army is extraordinarily good. What makes the Greek army particularly effective also is the fact that you basically force slaves called helots to fight for you at different times when you need to. So people who became slaves were often forced to fight for the armies. You have that. You have some cavalry. You have archers. You have slingers. You have all sorts of different types of soldiers and formations that you can use. But when it comes to picturing the Greek army, you of course are probably picturing the phalanx, the long-speared soldiers with brass helmets, brass armor, and large giant shields blocking missile fire while marching steadily to impale their enemies. And the Greeks were really good at doing this. The problem is, if you look at Greek history, and this is the theme that starts with Homer, but then continues throughout their history, the truth of the matter is they're good at using this against each other. Fighting and disputations, wars between city-states, civil war, if you want to call that, civil wars were not uncommon in ancient Greece. The phalanx were extremely effective, but they were also extremely good at killing other Greeks. Then again, you would have phalanx versus phalanx, and you would basically be trying to look for an opening so you could spear your opponent properly, so you would find it would be very devastating, but it would also be far more even battle compared to a lesser decorated military soldier with less armor or something like that. But the Greeks' main rival, other than themselves sometimes, is indeed the Persians. And the Achaemenid Persian Empire comes about and is able to overthrow and destroy the Neo-Babylonians in 539 BC. They immediately conquer all of the Levant. They threaten Egypt. They go into Anatolia or Asia Minor, and there's no Turkey, by the way, at this time. Conquer most of that. They control a huge swath of the Middle East. They control, of course, modern-day Iran. They rule from Susa, that's their capital, and their empire stretches towards Afghanistan and southern Asia. I don't think they get as far as Alexander will do, but they are a pretty formidable empire, the most formidable that has been seen in human history up to this point. And like all formidable empires, they have their own period of dominance for the next 2 centuries, and then they will be swallowed up by an even more dominant empire, being that of Alexander the Great. The Greeks have settlements and outposts in western Anatolia. These immediately come under fire from the Persians, and throughout the end of the 6th and into the 5th century BC. Remember, we're going in reverse, so we're going backwards in numbers. In the late 6th, early 5th century BC, the 590s, the 610s, the 6aughts, the Greeks start to encounter the Persians and start to suffer under them. The Persians take many slaves. The Persians capture their outposts in Asia Minor and stall Greeks and basically take over the Greek city-states there. Greek colonies there, and this puts a definite. This becomes an existential threat to the Greeks because they have the Persians have no hesitation about crossing the Aegean and invading Greece itself, and they are committed to doing that, and they will do that. Some of them like to travel over the Dardanelles and go near a city called Byzantium, which will become extremely important later, and go around the back way into Greece. They sometimes will sail across and invade as well. Their basic idea, their main goal throughout much of their fighting is to destroy the city of Athens. If they can destroy Athens, they can humiliate the Greeks to the point where they think they can get whatever they want from them. So basically, creating the Greeks, if they can destroy the major city-states of Greece, particularly Athens, they believe they can create them, make them a client state, make them their vassals, and dominate them, extracting slaves, resources, and land from them as much as possible. There's so. There's a couple of things to think about there. The major fighting starts before Thermopylae. That's the one I'm sure you all are familiar with. The Persians are extremely aggressive. Artaxerxes is one of the more aggressive kings. By the way, Artaxerxes might very well be Ahasuerus from the story in the Bible of Queen Esther. Who knows? But that's supposedly who the Jews believe is the king who married the Jewish princess, Hadassah or Esther. I think it's Hadassah. Yeah, and that's the famous story that you probably are all very familiar with. Inspires the story of Purim. But basically, Ahasuerus or Xerxes I is one of the most aggressive emperors, and he is committed to destroying as much of the Greeks as possible and subjecting them, making them his own city-state. And he's actually pretty successful at first. The Greeks are able to win. I'm trying to remember what came first. I think it's this one. The Greeks eventually meet him at a huge battle called Marathon. I think this is in like 490, 495. I might be messing up the dates, but this is one of the major battles between the Greeks and the Persians, and the Greeks are actually against all odds successful. Now the Persians are not bad fighters at all, but their men do not have the armor or the skill or the discipline to resist the phalanx. So if they're in close counter with the phalanx, they are constantly under attack. The challenge that the Persians have is to get around the phalanx. If they can get around the phalanx, and break the phalanx from the rear or the side, or flank them. They can destroy the Greek army. They can break down the phalanx into hand-to-hand combat, and then wipe them out from there. But the Persians have far more men than the Greeks normally do. But if a phalanx is able to remain sturdy, then the Persians have no hope. And the phalanx soldiers. The hoplite is the name of the individual soldier. These different warriors are from almost every Greek city-state sends these kinds of warriors into battle. So consider the fact that you have phalanxes from different Greek city-states going to fight. The biggest question is, will the different city-states step up and help each other fighting in different ways? Now, alliances between city-states have already been forming for quite some time. Athens, because it's on the coast, has become a commercially successful and wealthy city, and it has gained a lot of influence on different islands and different areas in the Aegean, and this will help them eventually form what comes to be known as the Delian League, which is an extremely successful league of commercial, social, political, and military mutual defense, mutual assistance pacts between the Athenians at the head and these other city-states. It's also called the Athenian Empire, which will be destroyed later on in an interesting way. The victory at Marathon leads a Greek soldier named Philippides to run 26.2 miles, supposedly, from Marathon to the city of Athens, and when he gets to Athens, he runs in and yells, "Nike! We have conquered," or victory. Interesting, that's Nike. Nike, by the way, the wings on, I believe it's supposed to be the wings of Hermes, who was the messenger god of the son of Zeus, who's the messenger god. So again, you can see it all over the place. Marathons, Nike, Olympics, all of it. It's everywhere. And that's where the marathon comes from. So the Greeks win this amazing battle at Marathon. The Greeks, thanks to a man named Themistocles, are able to actually develop a little bit of a navy, believing that in order to defend their rear, because usually what the Persians will do is try to surround the phalanx by landing soldiers behind the phalanx to destroy them. Themistocles is able to manipulate the Athenians into building a Greek navy of biremes and triremes. These are the different types of ships of the time, and basically naval warfare in the ancient world consists of basically ramming your opponents as much as you possibly can. You aren't really launching catapults. You don't have catapults. Your ships are supposed to be thin and quick and able to hit and basically T-bone your opponents into submission and destruction, and then you jump on and slaughter them as much as you possibly can, or watch them sink to the depths and go down the river Styx into hell, where Hades is waiting for them. This is all connected. This is all how the Greeks felt about all of it. Or actually, they're claimed by the sea, so that's beside the point. Basically, the Greeks spend the rest of the Greeks get invested in in a navy. And one of the major offenses and campaigns of Xerxes is the campaign that leads to the Battle of Thermopylae. Now Thermopylae is extremely interesting, not just because of course, you have the Spartans, the robust Spartans fighting off this Persian force, and being able to withstand it, and then eventually being heavily outnumbered, surrounded, and destroyed, but because you have various different Greek city-states sending various different troops to fight and hold off the Persians, once again showing the strength and unity for the Greek civilization. I think it's 479 is the Battle of Thermopylae, and basically for several days the much smaller forces of Leonidas and a few other Greek city-states, which have about 1,500 men, are able to hold back tens of thousands of Persian fighters until eventually Themistocles and his navy are defeated, and the Persians are able to land forces behind the Greeks. They send in their shock troops called the Immortals, who basically believed that they were fighting for eternal life, and if they died, they would live forever. And they are able to smash and destroy his forces. The Persians, this allows the Greeks to buy time and build up their forces. However, it does not spare Athens, which is sacked by the Persians. Eventually, the Greeks will beat the Persians and send them back to their own lands. I'm trying to remember exactly how they do that. This is through a series of naval and military land victories by the Greeks. And by the middle of the 5th century BC, the Persians have started to recede and the Greeks have started to advance back into Anatolia. However, it kind of becomes the infighting amongst the Greek city-states of the latter part of the 5th century BC will keep them from continuing to capitalize on a slow but steady decline of the Persian Empire. It will be someone later on who will fully embrace that. So this might have to be a two-parter. I've got so much to talk about with the ancient Greeks. Or Alexander could be his own lecture for all we know. I think I'll end here with one more story. Athens is rebuilt, and Athens is going to become probably the epicenter of Greek culture at this time. Athens had already developed, thanks to a man named Solon, a system of democracy in which the males of the city, the free males citizens of the city, were able to vote. Athenian women are actually pretty backwards compared to Spartan women, who are educated and responsible for training men properly. Spartan women are known for going up to their men and saying, "Return with your shield or on it," meaning if you are not, I do not care, do not run away and be a coward. Dying in combat is better than losing. So the what am I going to mention too? So Sparta is pretty predominant, pretty militaristic, pretty committed to creating strong warriors. Athens is far more interested in the development of culture, art, and literature and philosophy, and the 5th century is the golden age for that. You have all of the different parts of Athenian culture come to light. You have some of the most important poets and writers of the time. You have Sophocles, who creates, and basically, I don't know if Sophocles was from Athens, but Greek literature and playwrights are extremely important. The development of comedy and tragedy, the good endings and the bad endings, respectively, come from the Greeks. Greek plays are performed in amphitheaters, in outside venues where people are able to hear, because it's a semicircular shape in the middle of the stage. The acoustics, you're able to, basically, your voice is able to reach, if it's loud enough, the people at the very top of this theater watching you in an outside exposed area, and that is extremely common in Athens. It's common in every Greek city-state, but Athens kind of capitalizes on it. You have Solon developing democracy. You have the plays of Sophocles, such as Oedipus Rex, which is one of the most famous legends in all of history, thanks partially to Sigmund Freud. You have poetry becoming quite common. The Greeks themselves, the Athenians, form a league of different city-states and different islands between Greece and Turkey that become part of the Delian League. One of these islands is the island of Lesbos, where there is a large contingent of women who have relations with other women, and that's where we get the term lesbian from, or sapphic. Sappho was a Greek female poet who was interested in other women, who was written about in great detail, and of course, so someone who is sapphic is interested in female company in a certain way. So you have literary developments, you have cultural developments, you have sexual developments, you have all sorts of things coming specifically from the ancient Athenians. So you've got literature, you've got philosophy, you've got democracy, which is already common, but democracy is really going to reach its apex with one of the greatest leaders in Greek history, a man named Pericles, who is going to basically, believe he's the major builder of the Parthenon. He runs the Athenian democracy for a long time. He helps create the Delian League. He extends Athenian influence, and basically under him, in the middle of the 5th century, Athens becomes the most predominant and powerful city in all of Greece. And this is called the Athenian Golden Age, not just for what's being done politically with the development of Athenian democracy, the writings of people like Sappho and Sophocles, which are percolated all throughout the Greeks, but are very common with the Athenians, the development of the Delian League. Athens has become extremely wealthy through commercial trade, thanks to this league and thanks to what they call the Athenian Empire. But you can't mention Athens and its golden age without probably the most important contribution, or the most well-known contribution of ancient Greece, philosophy. Now, philosophy has existed before the ancient Greeks in different areas of the world. But the development of logical, step-by-step thinking and rationality is something that is seen as a development of the big three of Athenian philosophers. This starts with a man named Socrates, who challenges a party called the Sophists, who basically are relativists. And Socrates basically goes around questioning people constantly on different things, and believes that the only way that people can start to learn is by not acknowledging their ignorance. And this is the root of not only metaphysics, but also epistemology. Socrates is eventually put on trial by the people of Athens, who believe that he is trying to undermine the gods and contradict the established religion. Socrates, who believes in the gods, but believes really that most of the stories about the gods are nice fables, refers to the one, or one god in particular, thinking that there is probably one overall god who is the supreme being of heaven and earth. This has led many, especially in Christianity, to credit Socrates as perhaps a proto-Christian existing hundreds of years before Christ. He has this very deep connection to a monotheistic ideal, and also towards questioning and trying to find ultimate truth, and believing in ultimate truth and standing up for ultimate truth in the face of people who are relativists. So Socrates is eventually forced to give his apology or his defense. He refuses to back down, and he takes his own life by drinking hemlock. This is one of the most famous stories in all of ancient Greece. Exactly how true it is, we don't know. But his quest is taken up by probably my favorite philosopher, and probably maybe the most important philosopher of all time, a man named Plato. At least in Western philosophy, Plato is on the Mount Rushmore. I think it would be hard not to think of a philosopher who has been more influential than Plato. Plato creates a school of rationality, of study of philosophical thought and arguments, and he called the Academy, which is basically the first school of philosophy, or you could even say it's the first university ever created. And he basically takes from Socrates the idea of finding ultimate truth, and develops an entire systematic philosophy based on this. His most famous work is called The Republic, in which he not only creates a perfect ideal society, but finds a perfect ideal way for humankind to judge itself. His allegory of the cave, which discusses the darkness of the mind without searching for truth, is one of the most important segments of philosophy ever written. And he brings up his own tuti, a man named Aristotle, who, if Socrates is not the most important philosopher in the Western world, then it very well might be Aristotle. Of course, you've got Descartes, you've got Marx, you've got extremely important philosophers all throughout Western history, Augustine, who are going to be huge in centuries to come. But these two are the biggest hitters, in the fact that they're far more developed in their systematic philosophies than Socrates was. Aristotle is going to be an empiricist. He's going to say that the real Plato basically believes that the real perfect standard exists in an alternate world, in a better dimension, and so that we are just forms of the true, complete, beautiful goodness that exists elsewhere. And Aristotle is going to get into this idea that no, it's the form of something is in its shape, it's in its creation. And so he's going to be much more interested in studying the world around him and looking at the evidence in front of him, and he's going to develop empiricism as kind of an answer to his mentor. And I don't think that these men were absolutely against each other, but it is fascinating to see how Aristotle develops an idea of looking at evidentiary evidence. And this leads him into studying so many different fields, including politics, science, or natural philosophy as it was known back then, and of course aesthetics, which is the philosophy and the study of beauty. Far more interested in that than the more rational based, mind-based, thinking-based Plato was. And of course there's many more different schools of philosophy that are popular in ancient Greece, such as the Epicureans, who are basically pleasure seekers. There's Epictetus and the idea of Stoicism, which becomes a popular philosophy of restraint and self-control, and they're going to heavily influence the development of the Western world. Christianity will be influenced by all of the men that I just mentioned. That's kind of a sum up of the golden age of Athens. You have incredible discoveries in philosophy, you have incredible scientific discoveries, you have writers and playwrights and all sorts of political leaders that are moving Athens in a forward direction. However, all of this is going to change in 431 when the Spartans go to war with them in the Peloponnesian War, which is one of the first major wars in Greek history. And it's the first, and despite many different fracases and fights, this is a major civil war between Athens and Sparta that will last 26 years. It will be fought in different phases, and eventually the golden age of Athens will collapse. The Delian League will be destroyed, and Athens will be defeated by Sparta in a big surprise. And for the next 70 years or so of Greek civilization, things will be relatively quiet, with Sparta having assumed dominance and the Athenian golden age kind of subsiding. There's still a lot of scientific and literary discoveries and writings being made everywhere throughout the Greek world, but Sparta has asserted its dominance, and then eventually comes Philip of Macedon, and he will change the score. So I think I've got to wrap it up there because we're at 55 minutes and there's still a lot to talk about. I don't know. This could easily be a two-parter. I haven't even gotten to Alexander. My background is Alexander the Great on his deathbed, and I haven't even gotten to Alexander. I think that I'm going to have to do a part 2 of this lecture, and that part of, and I thought this would be over in 30 minutes. I always think it's going to be done sooner. If I think it's going to be done in 10 minutes, it takes an hour. If I think it's going to be done in an hour, it takes 30 minutes. So here's what we will do. I will get into Alexander the Great, the decline of Greek civilization, the rise of the Romans, and the legacy of the Greeks. We'll talk about the Byzantine Empire, which is a Greek empire in many ways, and the development of Greek Orthodoxy, which is all part of this, next week when we continue this lecture. So next Sunday, we won't vote. We can vote. No, I don't know. It's probably going to take another hour. So we won't vote again next week on the Friendly Neighborhood History channel here on YouTube like we usually do. I will just talk about I will start off with the Peloponnesian War, get into more detail on that, and then go forward and talk about the unification of Greece, Alexander the Great's empire, the conquest of the Romans, Greek influence on the Romans, and we'll talk about the development of Greece in the Roman Empire, and then again later in the Byzantine Empire. So, hope you all really enjoyed the live stream lecture. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll give you about 10 minutes for Q&A, probably means 20, but I'll answer questions about history and social studies. Really appreciate everyone coming and listening today. It's been a nice, fun discussion. I love talking about the ancient Greeks. There's so much more that I could say. There's so much more I want to say. And thank you so much, Kurgan, for becoming a Friendly Neighborhood Historian and becoming a member here. That would be really, really awesome. I really appreciate that. If you guys want to, consider giving a super chat. If you want me to go in depth on a particular topic in answering a question, a super chat helps. If you want me to analyze a particular political or current affairs issue, a super chat would be the way to go. And if you want early access, extra videos, and all the fun stuff that comes with it, including those wonderful emojis that Kurgan has, consider becoming a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. We have several different tiers of membership. So, hello, Linda. Good to see you. Joey, what about Tesla? Are you talking about Nikola Tesla? My favorite YouTuber? Oh, you're so kind, Faraz. I hope you enjoyed that talk about Persia. Topic vote ever again. We're never getting a topic vote ever again. Oh, you'll get one in 2 weeks. Love learning history of us. Super Chat is a great way to support us. Yes, everything that you give to this channel monetarily, I don't like to beg, but everything that you give to this channel monetarily, I use to improve the channel. The lighting, the microphone, everything. We are turning this into our studio. We are renovating the channel. We are making this channel great again. And we are doing that with the support from you. And I know, I just broke my own rules about politics. How can I join Super Chat? Well, Super Chat is just a comment or a question with a donation attached. You don't have to do it, and there's no pressure on anyone to become a member or donate or anything, but anything you do helps. And if you just want to learn history, watching the videos helps the ad revenue. So go watch the long form and the short form content we have here. That helps us earn some money, earn the money that we need. Can you do a live stream on long video on Lafayette? Ooh, that'd be fun. The Marquis de Lafayette. He is a fascinating individual. I have a long form video on the French Revolution. You can all watch and learn about Lafayette there. But yeah, I think he does deserve one. My long form video tomorrow will be a continuation. I've got a series on the Supreme Court, and I have a members only series on the Industrial Revolution. So the first one is free, but if you become a member, you get access to my other videos on that I'll be making over the next couple of weeks. So I've got 2 long-form series going on at the same time. One about the Supreme Court, that's free for everyone. Please go watch that. The next one drops tomorrow. I already did my first one last week, and the U.S. Supreme Court, that is. And, of course, the long-form videos on the Industrial Revolution, where I analyze different factors of this extremely important movement. The first one is free. After that, they are restricted to members only, and I've got the first one coming out this week sometime. Tanya, thank you so much. I really appreciate the super chat. It's very kind of you. Is there something you want me to talk about, or something you would like me to address in detail? And for those of you who are just joining us for the first time, welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. We're closing in on 10,000 subscribers. We'd really love to get there sometime this fall. So please like and subscribe, and that helps us out a lot. Why did the French have so many constitutions? Because you have different revolutions. You have to reorganize your constitutions. You have 5 different republics in different times that change. The First Republic obviously falls apart when the First French Empire is created. Then you have a constitutional monarchy until the 1840s. Then you create another republic. That one falls apart. An empire is created, the Second French Empire. Then the Third Republic is created, and that is thrown down thrown down the drain with the rise of Pétain and Vichy France and the Nazis in the Third or Last World War. And then after that, you've got and then you have the Fourth Republic, and I think that's dissolved in the late 60s, and now the Fifth Republic has been there since the late 60s, since de Gaulle took power back, and that is actually the longest lasting one, and it's barely 60 years old, and it's in peril right now. At least the government of Emmanuel Macron is. Corzo, thank you so much for the super chat. Always great to see you here. You're such a wonderful part of the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Have you thought about compiling a video about global left-wing violence? If I were to do that, I would have to do one about right-wing violence too, and maybe it's just best to talk about right-wing violence as well. I mean, if you ever mention how bad communism is and how bad left-wing radicalism can get vis-a-vis Mao or Stalin, you have to talk about Franco and Mussolini and Hitler, and I don't particularly believe Hitler was right-wing. I think authoritarianism is a shoehorn. And when I vote, I look at politics as a spectrum, but in history, and when you look at radical ideology, politics is definitely a shoehorn. Hitler and Stalin were not that different. They really weren't. And that could be because Stalin was a fascist, or that could be because Hitler was a socialist. Both are acceptable. Yeah, I probably should do both. That's a good idea. Maybe I'll put up a poll and see if people are interested in that. Which is older, Indus Valley Civilization, Egyptian, or Babylonian? The Babylonians probably have it by just a little bit, Jaden. Good question, though. The last assassinations have all been right-wing actors. No, they haven't. The targets have all been right-wing, but the actor, well, except for Vance Butler. Vance Butler was certainly a right-winger trying to kill people. Thomas Ralph was a Republican who targeted Trump, didn't shoot him. Thomas Crooks was a registered Republican. Just basing it off of him being a registered this or that doesn't mean anything. And why are we politicizing this violence? Why is political violence always politicized itself? That only makes things worse, especially when we're so polarized in the United States and elsewhere. Shoehorn, the horseshoe. I believe in the horseshoe when it comes to general politics. And thank you so much again, Tanya and Corzo, for your donations. I really appreciate that. Anything helps the channel. It goes back into helping this channel. Are Inuits, Aztecs, Mayas from the same migrants from Siberia, different migrants from Siberia? Different migrants from different areas of eastern Siberia and Asia and Polynesia over thousands of years. I mean, the Hawaiians don't have a united settlement in Hawaii until 1000 AD, but there were people in South America 3,000 years before that. Will the overtone window ever be repaired? It's shifted, definitely. No one would have considered transgenderism a major issue 20 years ago, and nobody would have ever considered immigration quotas after 20 years ago. But the right and the left have pushed these windows. The window is stretched out this way. It's so crazy. For those of you who don't know, the Overton window is what is in the major conscious of our society. What are the political positions and cultural ideas we are considering? Please tell me the history of antibiotics. Can't talk about that without the development of penicillin. Vaccines were developed in the late 18th century using parts of the disease, a smaller, more innocuous part of it, to actually infect the person so that they could develop antibodies for it. You don't have antibiotics until the late 19th, early 20th century. I'm not a huge expert in it, but that's what I can tell you right now, Hars. And please show some love to Hars, Harry, and Simon the Bunny, who do such a great job handling the chat and the channel. Really appreciate you guys so much. Sad, good to see you. I am not a nihilist. Who developed penicillin? It was Fleming, Alexander Fleming. He actually left a dish alone for a couple of days, came back and saw what was left in it, and Edward Jenner helped develop the first vaccines. What is your favorite historical tidbit to talk about friendly history? Napoleon basically sacrificing himself to a bunch of French soldiers who surrendered and joined him, because Napoleon had some guts. And Belisarius, it's good to see you again. Alexander Fleming, 1928. Yep, cowpox. It was the more humane version, or the less dangerous version to humans than smallpox, and that's how Jenner developed the smallpox vaccine. Catherine the Great, who created public health in Russia, was one of the first people to ever take the smallpox, took it so that her people would know that it was safe. Egypt used to put stale bread on wounds along with honey. Interesting. I do not believe in any ethics, morals, or any compass, because absence of God is absence of ethics and supporting whatever benefits you. Oh, there's people who act nihilistic even when they believe in tons of gods. Radical Islamic terrorism is nihilistic. The Ku Klux Klan is nihilistic. The cultic Jewish groups in Brooklyn and areas like that, some of them, not all Orthodox, but like the some of the ultra Orthodox. When I see religious extremism, cults of Kali, for instance, when I see religious extremism, I think of nihilism. Nothing matters other than your own existence, and I believe this to be the objective truth. Well, my existence matters, but so does yours, Soros. So I can't follow your definition of nihilism there. But yeah, Andrea, I hope I answered your question. Tanya and Corzo, so appreciate you. Talk about inbreeding hillbillies around the world. Most of the inbreeding hillbilly culture that people criticize in the Appalachian and southern part of the United States is a holdover from northern England and Scotland, where that was more common. And those immigrants settled and populated the areas of the southern part of the United States more so than the northern part of the United States. We talked about this on the channel a couple days ago. Woa, hello, good to see you. Why did Greece last so long as independent nation states rather than unifying? They didn't have a foreseeable existential threat other than the Persians themselves, as we were talking about. And whenever an existential threat would come around, they could unify and then go back to fighting with each other. So they were definitely more successful at it than the Mesopotamians were. Sargon of Akkad eventually got tired of city-states, and so did Menes in Egypt. Why even people who hated communism were often empathetic towards Che Guevara? What makes him different than someone like Lenin? Che Guevara fighting against dictatorial regimes in Central and South America makes him a more sympathetic figure, and he's definitely seen as this handsome, charming, hardworking. There's almost a romanticism around revolutionaries, but make no mistake about it, Che Guevara was barbarous at many times. Why is there an Athens in Georgia? It might have been built by Greek immigrants, but I doubt that. Greek immigrants came to the United States in huge numbers in the late 19th century. If you look at the United States, if you look at its architecture and its history and much of its geography, appealing back to the ancient Greeks and Romans is a huge part. The pursuit of happiness and the Declaration of Independence is Jefferson borrowing from Aristotle, who believed in pursuing happiness or virtue. Why there no founder of capitalism? Capitalism existed before Adam Smith, but Adam Smith is considered to be the founder of modern capitalism, at least the identifier of it. Communism was around in different forms and ways before Marx, but Marx is the one who gave it its modern economic identification, and it has been reinterpreted in social context to be a dialectic between the haves and the have-nots, the privileged and the underprivileged. I don't see. He did rebel against a corrupt and authoritarian regime, and then created a corrupt and authoritarian regime. The fact that Che Guevara didn't quite create one for Oz is probably why he gets away with it, but he was certainly okay with it. Why did communists believe factory workers would cause communism while in Russia and China? It was actually the farming peasants. Because Marx didn't understand how economics works. Basically, Marx and Lenin, too, felt that it was up to the machinists to overthrow. And there was some of this in Russia, to be fair. The peasants actually were kind of just in the middle and just went with whatever was being told to them. But the machinists did strike, and the communists did manipulate those strikes in certain areas, especially Petrograd or St. Petersburg and Moscow. But But communist revolutions were caused by groups of communist leaders stoking up disenfranchised peoples who would then respond with anarchic revolts. The communist revolution in Russia is more of a coup where the communists just manage to gain the upper hand and seize the government buildings and then kick out anyone who is opposed to them and allow the Soviets or these workers' councils to take over. However, these Soviets were soon stripped of all different opposition to the Bolsheviks, and the Bolsheviks were the only ones who were allowed to be on them. So farming peasants in China were extremely exploited, so Mao reinterpreted Marxism in the sense of oppressor versus oppressed, which is what Marx meant, but Marx was thinking in terms of industrial societies like his own, thinking that workers would want that, but workers were more than happy to go back to work, and if there was capital deepening, if there was workers' rights, if there was the ability to create unions and things like this. So I don't have a default profile picture anymore. I uploaded a picture of myself, and then it said make it toter. There you go, funny. Which ethnicity started cutting the edges of the coins to save money? Every civilization has struggled with this. The Romans were some of the first to do it. It's a common tactic for a society that is declining, that it gives into inflation. The USSR fell apart because of pressure from the United States and reforms that undermined its authoritarian regime from the inside. Did the RAF fly Franco from Morocco to start the Spanish Civil War? I don't know. I've heard that rumor. Basically, the British were pretty sympathetic to the liberals. The Spanish Civil War is not like the American Civil War. The Spanish Civil War, you have the nationalist loyalists, who are right-wingers, led by a man named Francisco Franco. They're supported by different sides. Conservatives support them, but the church is supportive. The Nazis and the fascists in Italy support them. Franco is kind of a fascist light. He's not a Nazi. He kind of has a tacit approval of the Axis powers, but he doesn't join them. And because of that, he's allowed to stay in power for the rest of his life. He's actually a pretty interesting guy. I don't like him, but I find him to be more complex than just, he's just a fascist dictator. This is an admiration. But he's kind of like Tito, but on the right. He's able to unify his people, he's able to appeal to cultural symbols, and he's able to kind of loosen and tighten his authoritarianism when it seems convenient for holding power. So he's not stupid. He's not just he doesn't get the bad tunnel vision of authoritarianism like Hitler and Stalin do. He's a little bit more like Tito in that regard. But you've got the right, which is supported by the church, the nationalists, the loyalists, the fascists, the Nazis. Then you have the left, or the liberals, the Republicans, they call themselves, who are just pro-democratic government. And that can mean anything. That's why the Soviet Union and the United States are supporting the liberals. Some of them are radical socialists. Some of them just want a liberal government. Some of them are capitalists. It's kind of all over the place in the Spanish Civil War. Does Kalahari tribe's genetic makeup more heterogeneous than a Chinese is from a Scandinavian to a Native American? No, I don't think they are. I'm not sure. Why do we keep the penny so long if it lost money? Because people like looking at Abraham Lincoln, and Americans like to pretend that inflation isn't happening. Hello, Lunar. Good to see you. What was the Renaissance? The rebirth of ancient Greek and Roman learning influencing political, cultural, and artistic development in Europe in the 15th century. No, the Romans were famous for diluting the gold and silver coins, not coin trimming. There was actually one famous emperor who minted a 2 denarii coin, but it was only 150% the weight of 1 denarii. Okay, thank you, Harry, for that. So he would spend money in 2 denarii coins, but tax in 1 denarii coins. That sounds like something Domitian did. Did you know about Romante Jews, Greek ones? A little bit. Interesting. Yes, that sounds about right. The Nazis did invade Greece with the help of the Italians. How did a small army from Arabia defeat the Romans? Would that be equivalent of Malta defeating Italy? Malta didn't defeat Italy. You're thinking of when they defeated the Ottomans in 1565. But the Romans took over Nabatea, which is Jordan. I've said before that it's Arabia, but it's not. But they never could control Arabia. They never could control the desert, and they lost to whatever Bedouins they fought against. So yeah, the Romans tried to take over these lands, but couldn't maintain them. Why are accordions so common in Hispanic mariachi music? Not sure. Mexicans are the most employed people in technology. Okay. Yes. We all know Jesus was a Mexican, and Gandhi was a Mexican, and Van Gogh was a Mexican, and Peter the Great was a Mexican. We get it. When did the macho man Russian stereotype start? Peter the Great. 6'7" guy, 6'7". Sorry, I had to. Doing his thing. Why did they put ridges in coins? Not sure. I think it's just the way the metal was alloyed. Can you explain about neoconservatism and how it was different from more traditional conservatism? I'll explain a little bit. If you want to do a more detailed explanation, think of the super chat, because I don't want to get into politics too much. But basically, neoconservatism is this idea of exporting conservative values, freedom, democracy, and free markets to other parts of the world. Traditional conservatism tends to be a little bit more nationalistic, at least in America. But traditional conservatives and neoconservatives didn't have problems until Trump, really. And thank you, Ozzy, for coming back to learn more stuff. Unfortunately, you're right at the end. The USSR fell because Mikhail Gorbachev in 1990 let the Berlin Wall fall, dismantling the USSR and giving Western countries have their independence back. Not fully true, but part of it was that, and that was in '89. For their olive oil, actually. Okay, is pandering to minority groups a common tactic used throughout history to win elections? Yes, the Irish were the minority group that the Democrats wanted to use for political influence in the late 19th century in New York, for instance. Tammany Hall. Any details on Otto Skorzeny? No. What German mercenaries are you talking about? The Hessians from the American Revolution? Do you think William McKinley would have done his plan for equal rights for races in his second term? Yes, I think he would have been far more aggressive about it than Theodore Roosevelt. Can you dig a little deep on Henry Ford and some things people don't give him credit for? Henry Ford basically realized when he specialized labor that he could basically give his workers time off. And Henry Ford discovered one of the most important economic rules, that there is a level at which overworking your workers actually lead, and having too many workers working at too long a time actually hurts your efficiency. By specializing labor, Ford was able to experiment with finding the perfect sweet spot between not getting enough out of your workers and overworking them. And he actually embraced the weekend after that. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you then sound like you only know about American history? I don't know. Ask me about non-American history. This is American history. Clearly American history. Why, when Enlightenment reached Europe, it evolved to liberal democracy, but during Islamic Golden Age of India and China, that did not happen. Political opposition. The Muslims were not interested in liberal democracy. Europe was far more interested in political change. And the American Revolution inspired many revolutions, like in France, Haiti, and Venezuela. Choose a date for your 10K goal. By Halloween. We can get there before Halloween. Can you please elaborate neo-Marxism? Don't want to get into politics too much again, but neo-Marxism is basically, thanks to writers like Derrida, Herbert Marcuse, and others, it's a reinterpretation of Marxism along cultural lenses. So you basically, Marxism, communism in a modern form probably hits on every single type. You've got different dialectics where you can identify the privileged and the underprivileged class economically, socially, by gender, by sexual orientation, by race, and then look for ways to upend that social norm to create complete equity. Is Islam incompatible with the West, or will it integrate? Secular Islam is more compatible with the West than radical Islam, to be sure. I don't know why gold is more expensive than silver. I think it's because it's rarer. I'm back again. I thought we'd be done by the time, but I got back, but apparently not. Yeah. Ivan IV was a much larger man. Go watch my video on Halloween, by the way, on Halloween. Learn about the history of Sawan. Ivan IV was pretty terrifying. He was very tall, too. I come here to get away from the craziness of the political channels, which is why we don't talk about politics unless you want to give me some gold. And yes, gold doesn't tarnish. World's problems is not Muslim's problems, but Muslim problem is the world's problems. Radical Islam is more of a problem for Muslims than anyone else. We have a live stream lecture for Halloween evening. Interesting. I could do a live stream lecture on that Sunday and talk about Halloween, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day, because they're all connected. Halloween was originally a Christian holiday, believe it or not. Well, the church was also against liberalism and democracy, wasn't it? Not fully. The Catholic Church in many ways was. When liberal democracy in the French Revolution turned against the church turned against the liberal democracy, but not fully. Republicanism, at least with a small r, was popular with the churches in the American Revolution. When did Slavs convert to Christianity? The Cyril brother, or Methodius and Cyril, created the alphabet for them in the 9th century that helped them convert to Christianity in Eastern Europe. Yeah, Sunday, the 2nd. That's All Souls' Day, I think. Hello, Arash. Who created terrorism in the world? Terrorism has always existed as a way to get attention on your side in argument. Is religion important for any society to progress? What's your view? Religion is an important part of the development of any culture and society, and I think it's an inevitable part of it. I don't know if it's for it can be progressive if it's helpful, and it can be extremely detrimental. Okay, please never do your Tucker Carlson impression ever again. Promise me that. Why wouldn't you want my impression of Tucker Carlson? Is that because you're lying to me? There are so many people out there. It's obvious. Everybody knows that I have a good impression of Tucker Carlson. I mean, it's frankly in front of you. But you're lying to yourself if you don't believe that. So yes, I'm not promising you anything. Samhain, yeah, it was a pagan holiday, but the church took it and was like All Hallows Eve, the celebration of souls. That became a huge part of the Catholic Church as well. The oldest remains of a blonde were found in Asia, well, Siberia. Yes, we're all looking for blondes, apparently. Where's the oldest religion? Probably Hinduism. I'm sorry, Hearts. It's a good impression. Yeah, the laugh's hard to do, but it's like this, just throw your head back and chuckle and cackle. It's a Kamala Harris-like laugh. Hi, Rats. Sorry we're wrapping up here. Why did America delete so many letters in our spelling when coming to America from UK? Because color should be quick to spell. Did you research your researchers? What? Anyone is welcome to research me and go back and check and fact check anything I've said, and I'm more than willing to admit when I've been proven wrong. I'm a historian. I'm not going to say, oh, I got this from this source and that source, because then this would be 90 minutes long just explaining stuff without the Q&A. I drop a knowledge every Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern. Has a disingenuous view of Woodrow Wilson. Are you? Okay, let's see here. And let me see. There we go. Oops. What was I doing there? Okay. Sorry, guys. Just needed to do this real fast. Okay. So, okay. Let me see. All right, you are wrong. It was in 9th century only for Serbia, Crelio, and yes. And they did, yes, it started there, and then it progressed throughout the rest of the Eastern Europe. Have you researched my stuff? I think the Elvis thing turned out to be true, but he's not Mexican for being 12.5% Mexican. I mean, that's a little bit of a crazy exaggeration. Oh wow. I didn't mean to not make him a mod. I just meant to time him out for 5 minutes. There you go, Harsh. You're back. Yes. Look at me. Look at me. I am the channel now. How did the religion of Buddhism come to China and take off? And why did it die in its own motherland, India? The Muslims were not a huge fan of Buddhism, made hundreds of thousands of Buddhist monks leave. D-Respect, you have to guess. I'm not going to say which religion I am, one way or another. Does Hars have is Hars a moderator again? Yes, he is. Why are the French hated so much? People hate success, and the French have been very successful. What was the incentive for American involvement in the Boxer Rebellion? The Americans were much more interested in creating an open, free trade policy with the Chinese. They had influence in Chinese trade in the late 19th century, so they wanted to maintain that. And Theodore Roosevelt actually kind of played peacemaker at the end of the conflict anyways. Why is it said the United States is a Protestant country when the first people to America were Spanish Catholics? Because the United States was founded by the British, founded by the British, and the Americans who got independence were of British origin and were mainly Protestant. Let me see. Do you think Poland will be attacked by Russia? It already has been. Will it be attacked again? I hope not. I don't think so. I'm American. I don't share where I'm from specifically, though. I have a degree in modern history, and everything you've said is correct as I know it. A little opinion here and there, but it's all around factual. Do my best to be as objective as I can. All right, you are not disingenuous. You speak your view genuinely. I speak my view genuinely. Very well. America, so 99% worse. Okay, all right. There we go. Okay, now we got Harry, too. What happened to the people subsumed in the Mexican-American War? Have they all mixed by now? Most of them. How Europe became so rich, although it was an agricultural economy. I mean, the vast majority of settlement in California, by the way, was after the war and by white people. Hispanics grew as time went on and immigration continued. Mainly extraction. The Europeans were able to use technology to extract and colonize. Hating the Seahawks? I hate the Seahawks right now. Well, I love the Seahawks, but I mean, I hate what they did to the Steelers today. That was just sad. Terrible game. What does it mean to someone who doesn't understand the language? Not sure. NATO invoked Article 4. What happened to the? Let me see how Europe. Let me see. Have I answered everything? Just want to answer everything. I hope not. What is the historically wrong with the 1619 project? 1619 project isn't historically inaccurate in the sense that it says that slavery changed America for the worse and came here in 1619 in the United States, British United States, by the way. But the truth of the matter is that slavery, the idea that slavery created the United States, yes, you can't tell American history without slavery. Yes, you can't. American history has been heavily influenced by slavery. Yes, the legacy of slavery has been a huge impact on Americans of all backgrounds, really. But the truth of the matter is, the idea that America was built by slaves for the purpose of slavery, I don't know if a project says that. I haven't read the book. But that argument is infernally wrong. It's completely wrong. The United States did not become a superpower until after slavery was abolished. And the way the North won was by being far more prosperous and far more successful and far more progressive than the South. So America is the North. The North was founded first. And, well, the North wasn't founded first, but the North won the Civil War. So there's part of that too. Is the first Thanksgiving story a lie? Go watch my live stream lecture on it. It's exaggerated. How big was the spice business 15th to 16th century? Extremely big. When did the Order of a Dragon establish and what was the meaning of it? I'm not sure which Order of a Dragon you're talking about. Why are you deleting comments that call you out on your BS? You mean like that one? It doesn't call me out. It's me playing around with my moderators because they are being cheeky. Yes, it is a history. We do Q&As every Friday and Saturday, and Sundays I do a lecture, and people usually ask questions at the end. Vermont owned slavery. Yes, slaves were common in the North until the early 19th century. Why should Muslims attack India Buddhism but got destroyed but not Hinduism? Hinduism is far more intrinsic to Indian society than Buddhism. Far more. But yeah. And yes, Level, I am censoring everybody. That's clearly what I'm doing. But yeah. Anyways, so I'm going to log off. Please like and subscribe on your way out. For those who are just joining us, I really appreciate seeing you for the first time. And for those who are returning, it's always great to have you here. We went way over for your sake to get a lot of questions answered. And I said 15 minutes and it was 30. So I doubled up on how much time I was going to answer your questions. But you had so many great questions that I just had to get them answered. And Level, I have no problem with you being on the channel and calling me out for my BS. But it's kind of hard to do it when I'm not spewing BS. Mexicans have the best type of blood. And racism. Racism has entered the chat. But yeah, thank you for that. Not Lucid, really appreciate you. Andrea, really appreciate you. We will be back Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern for Q&A. Saturday, we'll keep it going. And then next Sunday, check out part 2 of Ancient Greece, where I will talk about Alexander the Great and all of that incredible things. But we also have our long-form videos, Mondays and Fridays. You can go check those out. Check out my series on the Supreme Court. If you become a member, you'll get all my videos on the Industrial Revolution that will be coming out over the next couple of weeks. And we have short-form videos and early access as available for members. But yes, you're making me smarter. No. Okay. He didn't deserve to get timed out for that, Harry. He was just being fair. But, all right, take care. Have a great rest of your week. I'm very good at history loading now. Go check out my videos and watch the earlier part of this live stream to see how good I can be at history and how good you can be at history if you listen to me. But I hope you all have a great week. Take care. And remember, as always, love history. Bye-bye now.